Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Mira Prinz-Arey, Councilwoman for Ward B, and welcome to the virtual town hall. Although I think moving forward, we may calling this the Lunch and Learn, as we bring on city agencies to learn more about how things work in city government, and answering always your questions. And to start us off, we do have a question. Do you want to throw it up on the screen?
Right away.
Okay. And if I understand correctly, this question is about tax abatements, which has been a hot topic in Jersey City for decades. So, to read the question, tax abatements severely and negatively affect our school budget. Plus, it seems the city government has not complied with proper yearly audits and legal requirements of filings. Yes, sometimes developers don't comply. Why would you vote to approve tax abatements given these negative effects? Well, what I can say is that in the time that I've been on council and for a couple years prior, so about 5 years or so, the council has not voted on any tax abatements. And in fact, we've rescinded a number of tax abatements, and a couple in Ward E and one in my ward in Ward B. So we take this responsibility very seriously. As it goes to the audits, I do know that the compliance department is working on them, and they are doing their best to make sure that everybody is paying their share as it relates to the pilots or payment in lieu of taxes. So that's a great question, and I hope that that answers it for you. And so now, speaking of budgets, we are lucky to have John Metro, who is the business administrator for the city of Jersey City.
Hi, Mira. How are you?
Hi, I'm well, John. How are you?
Doing well. Thanks for having me on.
Great. Thank you for being here. So to start us off, why don't you tell the viewing public a bit about what the job is of the business administrator?
Sure. I think it's great to add some perspective. I've been with the city for just about 8 years now, growing from a budget analyst to the budget director, then on to the finance director, and on to business administrator. So I've mostly focused on the finances of the city, but now being the business administrator is more like, if you look at a private entity, it would be similar to a chief operating officer. And we deal with the day-to-day operations of the city, the director of directors, if you will, and work with the council day in and day out on resolutions, ordinances, and moving the city forward.
Okay, great. So basically, as it relates to the departments and the divisions, the department directors report to you, and you work with the administration on the needs of the departments, budgetary needs, contracts, the whole gamut. Yep. So basically,
correct. If you're looking at organizational structure, it'd be the elected officials first and foremost, and myself as the chief operating officer, and then the department directors and below.
Okay, great. So then let's jump right into the city budget. We are currently in budgeting cycle right now. We wrapped up our budget hearings, and we are working on amendments to the budget. So why don't you walk the public through the process from start to finish?
Sure. I think it's important for the public to know that this process is continuously year-round. It's never necessarily a start-to-finish perspective. We do work on a calendar year, which is January 1st to December 31st. So what we do is we start the year with a temporary budget. We put a spending plan together from the request of each individual department, as well as working with our elected officials on priorities and data sets that they'd like to see set forth. And we start an initial spending plan based on kind of the numbers that we used in the prior year. Not to say that they won't grow or shrink, but just to make payroll, continue some of those obligations. If we have snow issues or related emergencies, we could fulfill those obligations. And from that perspective, we gather all that information, we put it into what's considered an introduced budget, which is basically the formal handover from the mayor's budget to the council. Then it's up to the council to scrutinize each one of those numbers, and they go through each one of them with each department director, bring them in and ask them questions from everything from operations to personnel, what they can improve, how they could do things better, and really try to facilitate the best of what the city could do with the dollars allocated. And of course, always keeping in mind the tax burden. And from that process, we then go into amendment phase. and we then formally adopt the budget, which will allow for the fixed tax rate. I think it's important to just add two pieces of that, and that would be public input. There's two opportunities for the public to speak, both at introduction and at the amendment process. And we do have independent oversight on our budget process. The state does interact with our budget process, the Department of Government and Local Services, DLGS, and they have to monitor and review every one of our items prior to the amendment and the final approval of that budget.
Okay, great, thank you. And then what comprises the budget? How does the city get its funding?
Yeah, sure. So to walk you through that a bit, there's obviously a revenue side and appropriation side of the budget. The revenue side is all the money that we receive, not only from the tax base, but we also receive local revenues. These are your fines, fees, permits. Some are Jersey City resident based, some are visitor based. We do have occupancy taxes for hotels and various other opportunities to collect money there. Uniform Construction Code, which is our construction obligations. We do get state aid, which would basically be the receipts of taxes that are paid on from an individual to the state level. Some of those dollars do come back to the city, about 66 million of the 600 million. That number has been flat for about 10 years now. So, we anticipate it, but it's nothing that's growing as fast as our expenses are. And then we have grants, and we do have, last but not least, our abatement revenue that comes in as a special item. So that's our revenue side. And then diving into the appropriation side, you would have each individual department's budgetary items. And then we have, so that would be paying for your police, your fire, your DPW services, every public facing entity that we have. Statutory obligations, these are obligations that we're contractually obligated by law to pay. Examples of those would be health benefits for employees, pensions, those types of liabilities. And then the third part of that would be our debt service, which would be covering all of our municipal debt through capital expenses.
Okay, so a lot of things go into this budget. So one of the questions that always comes up is, as you, excuse me one second while I fix my earpiece. One second. Because we are on a calendar year budget, and as this departments move through their budget, what happens at the end of the year if they haven't spent down all their funding?
That's a great point, Councilwoman. So how that typically works is, whether it be, so the budget's broken into two sections. One would be the salary items, and then the other one would be the expense items. Pretty self-explanatory. Everybody that gets paid out of payroll goes through salary. Every other obligation, whether it be contractual or purchasing goods or services, would all be through the other item. Any dollars that are not allocated in those, or allocated but not spent in those pieces, get put into a reserve account for the year. And that reserve account helps us with any obligations that were to come in January, February, March of the next year. So those dollars are not lost. They're basically put into a secure safety box for any obligations that come in, because if we have an obligation, if we have a service that's rendered in the middle of December, we may not receive that bill until January, February, which would then be into the new budget cycle. So we kind of create a reserve from that, and then once that reserve lapses, it does go back into our cash balance, which can be used for future budgets, which would be the following year. So every 2 years we have a replenishment of those dollars that are not spent.
Okay.
And you could find that in the surplus item of the revenue.
All right, so then just as a clarifying question, it doesn't necessarily stay with the department. It rolls into a general fund, and then can be used to pay down bills that come in that a little bit late that the city was anticipating in the prior calendar year.
Sure. Without getting too technical into the accounting perspective of it, to summarize it, it does go into a reserve account citywide. It would be balance, but the balance of operations. And then those dollars are used to pay any of the obligations. And we always take a look at those obligations as they come in to make sure that they were part of the budget process in that prior year and not, additional service that was not rendered.
Okay, great. And then when the money rolls into the surplus or fund balance, as it's called sometimes,
Sure.
why is that important for a city to have?
So this is your ongoing continuous balance of cash reserve. And it's important for the viewers to understand that New Jersey municipalities are held to one of the highest standards as far as finance perspective. It's a cash basis. So meaning that when we do our budget, our revenues have to be done through what we have on hand in cash. So that would be that surplus number. And our expectations for future revenue cannot exceed what we've received in a prior year. And that's when the state comes in and takes a look at those numbers. So it's important to keep a healthy cash balance for two reasons. A, so you don't create a structural issue moving forward. If you're going to use $20 million in that surplus or fund balance in this budget, you want to make sure that you have the $20 million to replenish next year and not cause a imbalance structurally. And secondly, that those dollars could potentially be used for what some call a rainy day fund. The city experiences some kind of catastrophe or a special emergency, we could deploy those dollars immediately to facilitate some of those issues. And then, of course, we would chase, in that event, we would chase those dollars through FEMA reimbursements or federal relief, but we'd have the money to get the boots on the ground, so to speak.
Okay, that's great. So we're going to pause here for a second to see if there are any questions. No? All right, so do you want to take a quick break? And then we'll come back in just a few minutes? And then we'll start talking about the capital budget.
Perfect.
Great.
We have to be able to police ourselves because we don't want anybody to tarnish our badge.
When internal affairs complaints are not handled properly, the public may believe that most officers commit crimes, when in fact that's not true. Most officers are professional.
If complaints aren't taken properly and the community that we serve doesn't have a trust in the police department, I mean, there has to be legitimacy. If the community doesn't trust the police, how could we effectively serve them? And by having a really comprehensive internal affairs unit that handles the complaints properly and people have trust in the system, it enables us to do our entire job as a police department much better.
We need the community as much as they need us. So that citizen that has lost trust in the community could be a very important witness for us tomorrow.
Hudson TMA reminds you that before you ride, you should perform the ABC Quick Check. Here's how to do it.
You don't want your bike to fail you. So get in the habit of doing the ABC Quick Check before you ride. A is for air. Check that your tires are properly inflated. They should be pumped up to the inflation rating printed on the tire. Many bicycle pumps come with a pressure gauge, so you can make sure they're properly inflated. Low pressure tires can easily puncture. B is for brakes. Check that your brakes are working. Your brake lever shouldn't come closer than a thumb's width to the handlebar. Your wheel should spin freely when the brakes are off. C is for the cranks, chain, and cassette. Grab both crank arms like this and wiggle them to make sure they aren't loose. Spin the pedals and make sure the chain runs smoothly through the gears. Quick means making sure your wheels are on tight if you have quick release wheels. The wheels should be snug in the dropouts and the quick release lever fastened tight.
Most women who give birth recover without problems, but any woman can have complications after the birth of a baby. Learn the post-birth warning signs such as fever, headache, chest pain, shortness of breath, increased bleeding, or thoughts of hurting yourself or someone else. Knowing these can save your life or the life of someone that you love. Trust your instincts. If you feel something is wrong, call and get evaluated by your healthcare provider. If your symptoms get worse or you do not hear back from your physician, call 911 or go to the nearest emergency room.
RWJ Barnabas Health. Let's be healthy together.
Hudson TMA reminds you that a bicycle is considered a vehicle. When you ride a bike, you must obey the rules of the road.
Ride single file in the same direction as traffic. Obey traffic signs and signals. Signal your turns and look behind you before you turn. And always stay alert.
Great, so welcome back. And for those of you who are just jumping on, we have John Metro, the business administrator for the City of Jersey City, and we are talking about all things city budget. So before we jump to capital budget, I do have one more question as it relates to amendments and the process and the budgeting cycle, because we are currently doing that right now, and there were amendments that came before council at caucus that we'll be talking about this week. So how does that affect the process and the length of the process of voting on the budget?
That's a great question, Councilwoman. So 2 phases to that. So what we do is after we have our continuous budget hearings with the elected officials, the council, and the directors, we compile all the feedback from those council members in their priorities and what they want to see changed, or whether it be increase or decreases, or how they formulate the changes as they see it for the vision of Jersey City. And we pair that with some of our changes that we have to create. For example, if we receive a new grant, we have to put that in there. If the state comes back and tells us how to do some formal accounting separately, we do that. So we compile all that together. We present it to the council after the state has reviewed and approved it. And from there, we have a public hearing in which members of the public are allowed to ask questions or provide feedback or comments. And then we publicly advertise again and then formally adopt the budget. That process is a bit lengthy because, you need the state approval, you need all the stakeholders to engage and review all the comments and information. Then the public has to engage, and then final adoption. So that does take a little while, and sometimes that does take tax bills out a little further than normal on a 3-month cycle. But we just like to keep in mind that for the viewers that we always honor the grace period for tax payments as well. So it's 25 days after you receive your tax bill, not necessarily from any calendar date.
Okay, great. And we're also going to take another pause because we have another question in the queue. Okay, this has to do with income equality and the percentage of residents in certain income brackets, and what we can do as a city and what I can do as a council person to assist with this. So income inequality is a much larger issue than we can really cover in this lunch and learn right now. But to answer the question as succinctly as possible, as a council person, I take it as my responsibility to speak with residents that need assistance, whether it's housing, whether it's supplemental nutritional, whether it's WIC, whether it's job training, and direct them to other services that are with the county, the state, and the federal government. So it's not one issue, it's a number of interconnected issues, and this would be a great topic for a future lunch and learn. So William, I hope that answers your question as best I can right now at the time we have, and also with the guests that we have, but would certainly file that away for a future topic. So thank you. Okay, so John, now we are going to jump into the capital budget, which is another function of the city budget. And can you talk a little bit about what that is, how it's funded, and what it covers?
Sure. So this is kind of one of the larger aspects of the budget process that's multi-year and multi-pronged. So what I mean by that is all of our larger investments that have larger useful lives. And what I mean by that is the state allows us to bond and go to market and borrow money for some of our larger infrastructure projects and community projects. And we do that in a process called the capital plan. It's a 5-year plan that we have, and there's 2 components to that. The first being replacement and review of what we have as far as replacing vehicles, repaving streets, upgrades to facilities and government buildings. And then some of the other initiatives we have are new initiatives. We're doing the Arrow Farms piece, you know, Pompidou Museum potentially as that kind of evolves. So the process for that is we gather all those ideas from the first component of the renewals and replacements, and those get done into one sheet, and then the priorities go into another sheet. We take all that data, we present it to the council, and we just have open discussions about what the priorities are of the council and the mayor, and what the vision is for the next 5 years of capital planning over that bonding source. So from there, we create a capital ordinance. That ordinance again has a public hearing, so members of the public that have feedback on those priorities, or they see different goals or initiatives, are happy to engage in those. And then we go out to market and bond for these projects. So two pieces that are interesting in that, A being that we're now faced with historic low interest rates. So we have done some bonding in the last 18 months for some larger projects, and we'll almost pay nothing when you look at inflation and time valued money versus what we're going to actually pay in interest. It's almost like borrowing money for free, which is obviously great for taxpayers. The second component of that is just the ability to make sure that we're on a retention schedule and that things are continuously being replaced. That your street's going to be resurfaced every 5 to 7 years. That the public entities that we all use, public parks, public fields, infrastructure, that they'll be replaced, and once they're at the end of their useful life. And another component of that I forgot to mention is that we can only bond for these projects that have a useful life of 5 or more years. So we'll never be spending money in a budget for something that we're no longer utilizing. If we say that we're going to build a park and the park lasts 10 years before it has to be renovated again, we have 10 equal installments to cover that cost over 10 years. So a resident that's here today can enjoy it and contributes to the bonding of that. And maybe if someone moves or a new person comes in 5 or 6 years, they get to enjoy it and they're paying for it as well.
Okay, great. So then having a good city budget and a fund balance and making sure that we have a good credit rating is all key important components to the capital budget, correct?
Yeah, it's huge. So thanks for mentioning the bond rating piece of that. That's a large component. These are third-party entities, again, that we have no interest in other than just giving them our financial documents for them to review. And we've had 4 credit ratings upgrades, over the last 6 years, which speaks to our fund balance and our ability to secure financing at a much lower interest rate. And you would be surprised, because when we're talking about capital projects, we're talking about $80, $100, $120 million. The difference between 3% interest and 3.5% interest is millions of dollars over the course of 20 years. So we've been able to do a great job at improving that. Moody's, S&P have both upgraded us, and it speaks to our rich surplus and fund balance positions.
Okay, great. So now speaking a little more specifically, over the last 2 years, we've had some very serious budgeting challenges as it relates to the pandemic and loss of revenue and just the world we're living in today. So can you speak a little bit about the different kinds of funding we've received from the federal government and how that's helped us, and some of the challenges we've had as a city in doing the budget in a way where we have not had to increase taxes during a pandemic and during revenue loss? Because I think that's a really important piece of information.
Yeah, that's huge. Thank you for bringing it up. So March of 2020, we as a community experienced an entire different world, and our finances were not immune from that. So we did our best calculations, and we came up with a $70 million deficit. And we thought it was important to provide that to the council and to the public at large, just so they understand as we make some of these decisions moving forward, what we're looking to accomplish and what we're looking to combat. And some of our priorities there were, taking a look at our revenues, and we do have a very large revenue source for, people coming to the city, visiting, local economy, that was all just evaporated within a day. It was really something else. Our courts shut down. Really just not great for any financial perspective. But as credit rating agencies said, we were at the epicenter from a financial perspective for the COVID pandemic. So we took a look at all of our revenue sources, and we took a look at all of our appropriations and costs, and we did our best. We made some really tough decisions, but we cut a lot of programming, and we tried to provide as much stability as possible, but within the financial framework that we were able to present. And last year we did receive some money from the federal authorities called CARES Act, and those dollars did help facilitate with some of our pandemic-related costs. They were specifically for, at the time, emergency testing, cleaning and sanitizing, providing masks to every member of the public that lived in Jersey City, information campaigns, awareness campaigns. That those dollars were really allocated for those purposes. Didn't necessarily help us from a structural position in our financing, but really did help get us through the emergency, and we were thankful for that. But again, we worked with the council and the councilwoman, and we really did a deep dive into our finances, and we found a way to still provide services while not creating a larger burden of taxes to residents of Jersey City, as well as being able to provide small business grants to many businesses throughout the city, which we've gotten calls and emails, and I know the councilwoman has as well, just thanking us for that. And it was the difference between them staying open or not. And it was really life or death at that point for them. And then entering this year, we did receive a lot of money from the American Rescue Plan. In total, we received $140 million. 70 of it comes this year. The remainder of it comes next year. And understanding how difficult times are for residents this year, the council and the administration have worked together. And in this budget amendment, we reduced taxes over $900 on the average assessment, using those dollars and putting them back into the pockets of the taxpayers, which is critical. In addition to that, we also have a rent relief program for any individuals in Jersey City that are owner occupied. We're going to forgive rent payments that have been stalled or delayed for up to $10,000 for those individuals. So, we've received a lot of money, and we've worked hard to allocate that to get it right back into the local economy and the pockets of our residents.
Yeah, and I know a number of the businesses were very thankful because they were able to keep their doors open, but also there are people employed. And that, again, relating to the other question about income inequality and how all that ties together, that is like a really strong statement for a city to make, that we're supporting businesses, and then in turn they're supporting their employees, and then their employees can support their family. So this kind of shows how everything is really, truly interconnected. So thank you for that. Yeah. We're gonna go into this, I'm sorry, what?
If you don't mind me adding, we also had food insecurity initiatives that facilitate some of those questions. Yep.
Yeah, no, and our Department of Health and Human Services did an extraordinary job getting a lot of grant money, which is money from the federal government, state government, county government, to help offset some of the costs that taxpayers might normally have had to pay. So we really, I can't say enough about the work that the director has done during this time. She's probably deserves a key to the city. But anyway, that's another conversation for another day. We're going to take another short break, and we're going to talk a little bit more specifically about the timeline of this year's budget and why it was introduced a little bit later than in prior years.
You know those times when you need to see the doctor, but you just can't get to the doctor? So where do you go? Go to the App Store, download the Telemed app from RWJ Barnabas Health, and you see the doctor right away, from any mobile device, whenever you want, wherever you are.
Quality care, no appointment necessary. The doctor is online when you download the Telemed app.
Don't you feel better already?
RWJ Barnabas Health. Let's be healthy together.
Hudson TMA reminds you that whenever you are out on your bike, there are several things you must remember to stay safe.
That means when you ride in the street, ride in a straight line with traffic on the right side of the road. Riding against traffic is dangerous. it puts you where the driver of a car isn't expecting you.
Meaning he might turn in front of you, or worse, into you.
And you know what that means.
Ouch.
And if you're riding with friends, always ride single file. And here's something else to remember. Always obey traffic lights and signs, and pay attention to lane markings.
When you see one of these, stop. When you see one of these, yield. Traffic might be coming from one side or the other.
Now, since your bike doesn't come with turn signals,
use your hands.
But always check for traffic before you turn. Do this to turn left, this to turn right. Also, some states allow you to do this to turn right, and do this to stop.
The Jersey City Medical Center. You know it for its award-winning, life-saving ambulance service. It's also your health hub, with health and wellness locations staffed with certified professionals all through Hudson County. The Jersey City Medical Center, here to help you with your healthy, here when you need us the most. The Jersey City Medical Center. Visit us on the net to learn more. Jersey City Medical Center, Robert Wood Johnson, Barnabas Health Facility. Let's be healthy together.
Hudson TMA reminds you that a helmet can only protect your head if you wear it. Take a tip from Elizabeth and Xander.
So just think of your helmet as part of your gear. You don't see a soccer player without shin guards.
You don't see a basketball player without shoes.
So don't ride your bike without your helmet. It's part of the gear.
Let's take a look at proper helmet fit. The size of a helmet is very important. It should fit comfortably without rocking from side to side. The helmet should fit level on your head and low on the forehead, no more than 1 or 2 finger widths above the eyebrow. Adjust the lengths of the straps so that the buckle is centered under the chin. Side straps should be adjusted so that they form a V shape under and slightly in front of the ears. Lock the slider if possible. Buckle the chin strap and tighten it until snug. No more than 1 or 2 fingers should fit under the strap. Lastly, make sure the helmet is secure and doesn't rock back and forth. If a big yawn doesn't pull the helmet down on your head, tighten the chin strap.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back. Mira Prinz-Arey, Councilwoman for B. Glad you guys are here with us. We have another question from Barbara Wydell. Barbara, thank you for writing in. During the pandemic, it's been very challenging to do what I would have done my normal quarterly meetings, which is something I've done since coming into office. So what I've tried to do is transition as much as possible onto virtual. So this way I can bring the city agencies to the residents, the same as I have been doing for the last 3.5 years, but in a slightly different format. Because I know that there's been challenges getting space, people's comfortability meeting in person, even the ability to meet in person the last 2.5 years. And I will be reaching out to you with updates from our meeting, because I also have some very exciting news about the Welcome to Jersey City sign. So we can look forward to hearing from me very shortly. And now I'm going to bring John Metro, Business Administrator, back to do a few more questions about the city budget. Hi, John. Welcome back. If you're just joining us, this is John Metro, Business Administrator for the City of Jersey City. So in years prior, usually our budget is introduced anytime between February and, say, April, May. Then come to the council for the hearings, and then public hearings, and then the vote on the budget. This year, the budget was introduced fairly late, even by normal standards. So can you talk a little about why that was?
Sure. I think everybody could agree that we're not necessarily in normal times as we usually were. Last year, tried to introduce in February, which we got close to. This year, we wish to continue that process and continuing to get that budget proposal out early, allowing the public to digest it and allowing the members of the council to go through with a, red pen and kind of get through their priorities. However, we weren't able to introduce this year until later on due to the need for the American Rescue Plan dollars and kind of learning as we go. And that was true for the federal, state, county, and local governments on how the money is going to be able to be utilized, how it's going to be spent, and then from an accounting perspective, how they'd like to see it injected and continue to be built upon. So with that being said, we had to have some stalls and delays, but the good thing about it was we were able to still hold all of our public meetings with the council and our public hearings a little later than usual, but we still engaged in that process, and we're able to use the money for the first time in the right time. We don't have to make any amendments or do anything crazy from a finance perspective. What we introduced is pretty much what we're looking to adopt, with some variations and input and feedback from the council. Next year, hopefully we're in better times. We'll look to get back to that February deadline.
That would be great. Because I know back in 2019, there was a goal to start introducing our budget earlier, and then in 2020, we had introduced it in February, and then in March, everything's shut down. So, I think that all things considered, the city has been doing a pretty good job in making sure that services continue during the pandemic as best we can, and keeping the ballot budgets for residents, for taxpayers, and for renters alike. Because whether you pay it directly to the city or not, everybody pays property taxes in some way, shape, or form. So, John, any final thoughts before we let you go?
No, thanks for having me on, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak to the public, and I'm always accessible. If anybody has any particular questions or comments, we're always open to feedback and encourage public engagement in the process. I'm going to work with the councilwoman and the council as a whole to create a vast budget book, which we hope to actually be able to get underway October of this year, pending a few hiccups. But that'll be a lengthy book that'll have some spreadsheets at the beginning that kind of lay out how the budget's done, and then definitions and timelines, and kind of giving the public a lot more information on how they can engage, and we look forward to working together on that initiative.
Great. Well, then I look forward to bringing you back in October to talk more about that, whether it's virtually or in person at a community meeting. So, John, again, thank you for your time, and have a great rest of the week.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you. Pleasure.
And then a couple things before we wrap up. Some upcoming events and things to know. There is now kayaking in Lincoln Park in the mornings with Urban Paddle. You can go onto their website to register, and the kayaking is around the lake. It's actually a really nice opportunity to experience the park from a very different perspective. This weekend is Pride Weekend, so there'll be a number of events downtown on Saturday and Sunday. And then coming up next Saturday, we have McGinley Square Live at the Plaza at the intersection of Montgomery, Bergen, and the Boulevard. That's from 1 to 3. And then we have Lincoln Park Live, Music at the Fountain. We're going to be starting at 6 p.m. for this. We are happy to have the Harlem Chamber String Quartet, and we're going to have some really great children's activities in advance of the performance. So please do stop by. Again, thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next month.